Welcome to the GamesNet Berlin Europe podcast. Here, we speak with extraordinary games industry professionals and listen to their story to learn all about what they've built and who they are. GamesNet Berlin Europe is the international games industry initiative of MediaNet Berlin-Brandenburg, the networking association for the media, creative, and digital industries in Germany's capital region. My name is Simon Ohler, and I will be your host for this program. Today, we are speaking with Derk de Geus, or Derk de Geus, a Dutch man with an interesting name, who is the co-founder and co-CEO of Paladin Studios, a successful mobile game company based in The Hague in the Netherlands. We are having a wide-ranging conversation as usual, and this time we are starting with the philosophical stuff, with the spiritual stuff, with consciousness, because Derk is an avid practitioner and is on a spiritual path, as usually when we ask our guests in the end, as many of them are. And today we flipped the script. So we started with that. And Derk is very open and shows a lot. And so if you're listening to this, first 30, 40 minutes of this are going quite deep into this, which I think is good because it gives us an idea. And if you've never heard of this, don't let it scare you. We are doing a decent job in the episode of connecting it back with practical work stuff, career stuff. And we do have great advice for you when it comes to making relationships, about making change, visionary change in your company, about what counts as a founder, what stages you go through as a founder. And that's how Derk, Florian, and I really tie up both the spiritual stuff and the world of forms, the practical stuff. So that's what you can expect in this episode. See for yourself. Please relax and enjoy our conversation with Derk de Geus. Hello, good day, and welcome to the GamesNet Berlin Europe podcast. Yes, it's me, Simon. Intro from me today, but of course, I'm as always here with my co-host Florian. Hey, Florian.
Hey, Simon.
Hey, thanks for letting me do the intro today. It feels like ages ago that I last did it. We have a guest today, as always. Our guest today is Derk de Geus. Is this right? Geus or Geus? I'm always confused with that.
You know what? I approve. The Dutch way to say it is Derk de Geus, but I'm not gonna ask it of anybody.
Derk de Geus. Yeah, I can kind of do it a little bit. Okay. And as for a little intro, as for a little bio, you tell me if I'm right about this. Derk de Geus, a games industry veteran from the Netherlands, co-founder and co-CEO of Paladin Studios, a successful mobile game company. Correct so far. Based in The Hague, founded over 17 years ago. Yeah. And you guys have been releasing your own IPs, but you also worked with well-known licenses, such as you made a remaster of Cut the Rope, developed games published by Nintendo, and now a game in cooperation with Netflix called Nailed It Baking Bash.
That's correct. Yeah.
That's correct. Nice. You're also an investor in a games fund, and you're the chairman or a chairman of the Dutch Games Association.
That's correct.
Very nice.
10 out of 10 so far. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Well, let's see if we can keep it up. And we normally kind of start this bash with a bit of where we kind of go into the world of work and games and the industry, because I'm starting the round now, and I'm the resident philosopher. We thought maybe we could start on the more consciousness-focused side of things. And we actually met before at a retreat in the Netherlands, or at like an event in the Netherlands that was very much related to this. Yeah. And so, that's my intro. Welcome. Thank you for being here. What's on your mind at the moment? What's important to you? What would you like to open up with?
Oh, that's a really interesting question, because there's a lot of things important to me. But I would say what's on my mind right now is, of course, my company. There's a lot going on in the company that is asking for some attention, some tender, loving care, if you will, and so that's a big part of my day. Um, you know. Uh, the Dutch Games Association, same thing. Of course, we're building up this whole ecosystem in the Netherlands, and that is also top of mind. On a more personal note or the philosophical note, I would say consciousness is definitely top of mind, and of course, that's a term that's super vague and broad, and it can go in many different directions. It depends on where where you would like to see it go. But we can go deep into the rabbit hole if you want, or stay a bit closer to home. That's all good.
Very nice. Yeah, let's see. Let's start. Let's start on the surface. So, for context, we met for the first time at an event by a Dutch organization called Open Business Leaders. It already had that ring to it then, but it transformed into a new organization called Origins, an organization that a previous guest on the podcast, Stephen Lee, is also familiar with. And I think you've been to some things together.
Yeah, we're good friends.
Exactly. And so what is, I guess my first question would be, how do you combine business and consciousness? Because I think in our culture, it often is separate. I think we're coming closer to connection. How did you discover this topic for you? When did that maybe start for you?
Well, to answer that last question, we have to go way back into time to my childhood when I was, I guess, 12, 13, 14 years old, discovering non-duality and consciousness books, Buddhism, meditation, but most of all, the philosophy of non-duality, which is, I mean, it's really tough to describe it, but it basically states that consciousness is all there is. There is nothing outside of consciousness, and that needs to be taken not just in a way that, okay, well, your perception is everything, but it also suggests that consciousness is in fact limitless, and there is only one consciousness. That's a bit woo-woo for a lot of people, and I can totally relate to that as well. I've been struggling with that concept for a long time. I dropped it for a long time as well. But over the course of the years, especially in those I would say those were my formative years in terms of my spiritual journey, and mostly intellectual. So reading the books, writing in my journal, just contemplating, reflecting, and figuring out, well, what is this thing? Why am I myself? Why am I me? That was like this question that was bugging me back in those days. And I gradually dropped it or pushed it down. I don't know. It wasn't a conscious effort, action, but I got more into making music, creating my studies. Creating stuff, creating websites, building games, learning how to code, all of that stuff. I started my company Paladin 17 years ago, indeed, and sort of the spiritual part, I think, got to the wayside a little bit. However, what entrepreneurship did bring me was a platform and a necessity for personal growth, because I very quickly realized that all of my ambitions and dreams were not that easy to achieve. In the beginning, I was like, yeah, I'm going to be a millionaire before 30, and I'm going to be, we're going to create a game studio. It's going to be awesome. We're going to have 30 people working on great projects and all that kind of stuff. And then, pretty much in the first year, we sort of hit several walls, I guess. And I say we together with my co-founder. Working through those walls and working around them, figuring out how to deal with reality. That was basically the journey I was on. So basically going from the super spiritual, like everything is consciousness, everything is love, it's all a dream, to getting the reality check on the ground, doing the dirty work of building a company, with all of the, everything, because everything inside of you, in terms of your psychology, can be a blocker or something that moves you forward. Things like the relationship with money, things like, do you trust people? Can you let go of things? But also, can you build the discipline? I was super lazy when I got started. Can you build a discipline to really get going every day and drag yourself out of bed, even if things are rough, Can you bear the burden of leadership? Can you take responsibility for whatever it is you're doing? And that really sharpened my axe, if you will, in
Hmm.
terms of how to work with myself and be a human being in this beautiful world, which is
Hmm.
also very challenging and demanding. Um, but over the course of the years, I sort of forgot or lost touch with that spiritual side a little bit. And I think it's been, well, a year, maybe 3, 4 years, um, that I consciously made the effort, the decision actually, to re-establish that connection and to dive more into the mystic part of of the experience of being human. And the beauty of that was that it suddenly created space for me to also be a better human in the most general sense, but also specific roles, like be a better entrepreneur, be a better CEO, be a better father, better partner, better friend. All of these things start to create more space in terms of what I could do. So for me, spirituality and things like entrepreneurship, but it's not just entrepreneurship. It's all of the challenging things, right? Like being
Hmm.
a father or mother, and being a partner. Those are key challenges in your life. And, um, without a spiritual framework or a philosophical framework, a philosophy of life, if you will, it's very tough to navigate those waters. With it, it's still tough, but it's a little bit more um, directed, if you will. So it really helps me to shape those parts of my life, and the vice versa, by actually not losing touch with actual life. Um, that is a spiritual journey unto itself. So it's really mutual benefit, I would say.
Great overture. Thank you. Really great. It gives us so much to go off.
Yeah, I can
Amazing.
imagine.
Amazing. What an opening. Well, okay, I have many questions.
Sure.
So and thank you for really laying it out. And I think, quite the unusual opening to one of these episodes. So um, we promise we'll bring it back to actionable stuff, and you already brought it back to actionable stuff pretty much. So
Hmm.
I think we can do a good balancing act today of connecting the two, which I think is so important, such an important translation job, to be like, yeah, it might sound woo, but look, it's actually practical. That would be my kind of goal for us today, to see what we can make of it. Um,
Hmm.
because you started with your childhood, my first question, just to go back there, is you said 12, 13, 14, so quite early to the party. I mean, many people in their lives hit some sort of wall. You've described walls already. And they're like, they need to find a solution, or, the classic pray to God when you're down bad. But
Yeah, of course.
you actively found these topics in your youth. What
Hmm.
compelled you? What brought you there? How was it?
Uh, well, I think that was a very turbulent period in my life. So it was one of the ways to deal with the situations that were thrown at me. So in that sense, I'm not an exception there.
Hmm.
Um, I do think that I naturally gravitate towards mysticism and spirituality. So it was a natural way for me to figure out, like, hey, what's going on? Like literally crossing the street and wondering, like, why am I me? I mean, that's a fundamental existential question, right? It's not something you
Yeah.
can just lay beside. It's like, especially if it starts to bug you, then yeah, you need to deal with that somehow. So
Hmm.
yeah.
I see. So you did face some trouble. Do you want to talk about that, or is that maybe not for here?
Nah, I guess it's not for now, not for today.
Understood.
It's also not really relevant, I think, for the topic. But yeah, there was
great.
trouble. Yeah.
There was trouble. Okay, got it. Yeah, understand it. I had trouble, and I listened to a lot of heavy metal and got pretty angry.
Yeah, exactly.
So-
But it's like, yeah, but that's also you need a release, right? So if you have this tension building up in your life, whatever it is, right? It could be a tough client or I don't know, whatever. Then how are you going to deal with that, right? And the answer is not always, oh, you need to sit down in meditation and just breathe deep, and then it's going to be chill, dude. No, sometimes you just need to rock out on heavy metal and let all the anger and the frustration and the energy energy is energy, right? There is no good energy, bad energy. Sometimes there's just so much energy in your system, and finding a way to release it, I think, is critical. So yeah, there's nothing there's nothing that you cannot use as a spiritual practice in that sense.
Yeah, heavy metal as a spiritual practice. I
oh
like
yeah,
that.
for sure. Yeah.
And it is right. All music is and art and so on. There's and that's what
For
you
sure.
said too. So maybe that's the next question, because you said you kind of you transmuted your research into activity. So then you went into art and creativity. When was that? What did you do there? Is that when you also already got the idea to make games?
I made games, quote unquote, at a very young age already, like 9 years, 10 years old. Just playing around with QBasic on my PC, my father's PC actually, and so just messing around. And of course, it was total crap. There's nothing, it was nothing literally. But just messing around with that was quite kind of fun, but not. It wasn't games in the beginning. I think it was more music and drawing rather than games. But that also, I only sort of discovered games, if you will, when I was at my internship, and I got the challenge from my boss to find a 3D engine for visualizations of products and architecture and that kind of stuff. So that forced me to dive into the world of 3D engines. So I tried a lot of different ones. This was in the time of Shockwave and Virtools, and I settled on an engine called Quest 3D, which is an ancient dinosaur of game engines. It's not really a game engine even, but it was really really powerful actually for its time, especially, and that sort of sucked me into the world of programming because I loved that. I just really enjoyed doing it and building all these things. And suddenly I was able to create worlds and interactive scenes. And yeah, so they literally had to drag me out of the office at the end of my internship. Like, dude, you're done. You're done now. Yeah, just these little particles. I'm almost, yeah, okay. So they had to kick me out. So that was the beginning of of games.
Okay, how old were you then, or when was that? In the which years were those?
I think I was 19 years old. 19 years old, something like that. Yeah, I think I started Paladin when I was 21 years old.
Right.
So yeah, it was 18 or 19.
And Quest 3D actually a Dutch engine.
It is a Dutch engine, yeah. We started Paladin in the junk room of the Quest 3D office, so we know those guys pretty well.
All right, so they did kick you out, but you did come back, right? And then you.
Well, I didn't intern at Quest 3D. That was a different
right.
But a different company. But no, they kicked me out in a loving way, in an appreciative way.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Not quite the joke I was going for, but almost. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Okay, nice. So let's say somebody was stuck with you in the end, and it had to do with Quest 3D, and it was Quest 3D. No, okay, good. Very nice. Ah, sick. So what did you say? You started in the junk room,
Yeah, in the junk room of Quest 3D back then. Yeah,
like in between trash.
2005, 2000. Yeah, literally. No, well, not like. Well, I mean, there were boxes, and we
Yeah.
could fit 2 desks in there, and that was enough for us. So we
Oh,
spent
nice.
the first half year there, and then we got our own office because we had two interns at that point. So we needed our own office, and we just moved out.
Okay.
It was really
Humble
kind of them
beginnings.
to let us in. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, yeah.
Thanks, Quest 3D. So they
Um,
have a double kind of influence on your
oh yeah,
initial start.
they were a big influence. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, amazing, amazing. Okay, well, and in terms of the consciousness line we were on in that time, that wasn't a topic for you. It was more like let's say a cope for you, or an entryway for you during youth. And I mean, I'm sure you didn't forget
Mhm.
everything, but it wasn't your focus.
Yeah.
But then you returned to it closer to the now. And
Mhm.
yeah, maybe you can tell that story, and then we can jump into all other sorts of things. I'm sure Florian wants to jump in at some point. But so how did you return to that after probably 1.5 decades or so of just creating and not being so concerned with it?
I think there were two parts. First was that I was close to burnout. So again, it's the crisis. You know, you
Right.
need that crisis to transform and to go deeper, like figure out the underlying mechanisms. And I, at that point, I didn't really do any retreats or group sessions or anything. I was really going solo, if you will, just reading books, figuring it out on my own, because I felt if I would be part of a group or you know a workshop, or I think part of me felt like, oh, that's like cult like, or want to fall prey to other people's ideas or manipulations or whatever. Honestly, I was just afraid. I was just scared because if you put yourself out there in a retreat, you really have to be vulnerable, and that was something that I was still not quite ready for at that point. But a couple of years back, when I was closer to burnout, I started to discover um, my way back into it, and I think it started with tantric practices, and it's slowly escalated, I guess you could say, or accelerated with things like meditation and group retreats. I did a bunch of retreats that were actually, this was when okay, so timeline wise, this was when
Mm.
I fired myself as CEO, hired a new CEO, because I was so close to burnout. I had to do that. I had to basically say, okay, I'm going to pull the brake. The emergency brake. I'm going to step out for a while. I thought it was permanent, but it turned out to be a while. And first thing I did was to create more time for retreats. And at not the first one, but the second one, I actually committed myself to discovering more, because there were some powerful exercises like breath work and some shamanic visualizations and journeys and things like that. Um, and that felt really powerful. And afterwards, I committed myself to to finding magic in the world and seeing like what is this all about, and to really take it seriously, because up until then I was basically the materialist slash rationalist that's just well, we're all just molecules in the end, you know
Yeah.
and the spiritual realm, what is there to be found. And I wasn't quite sure, but that first thing or the second one really brought me onto that path. That was also when I got invited to join for a trip to Colombia to do ayahuasca.
Mm.
Um, and that also got me on track to learn more about psychedelics and all of that. And of course, psychedelics are just like, if the doors are shut, then the psychedelics are basically the key to opening the spiritual realm And I started learning more about that and seeing that they can really induce this mystical experience on a reliable basis, and that this is life changing and profound, quite profound. I got curious about that. I tried psychedelics. I went to Colombia for the ayahuasca thing. In the end, took a while to get there, but we finally did. So I think that sort of opened everything up. And now, when you fast forward a little bit, I would say psychedelics are great as a tool to open things up, but they can also become a crutch, right? So I realize that the basic practice, things like daily meditation, yoga, that kind of thing, just the basics are as important as anything else, maybe more important than anything else, because it's nice to have awakening experience and realize God consciousness and universal consciousness, and all of that. It's beautiful, and I warmly recommend anybody interested listening to this, like, oh, what's this? I'm curious, or
What is he talking about?
Yeah, yeah. If you hear that call, if you feel it inside you, then by all means, right, do it and go for it, and you'll find your way. There's many ways, but in the end, if you use assisted therapy, if you will, that all will take you very far, and it will give you a glimpse of what is possible. But in the end, you're going to have to do the actual work in your daily life, and that means having daily practice. So cleaning up your system, cleaning up your body, becoming as light as possible, if you will. So yeah, there's a lot of that right now that I'm working on.
Yeah, very cool. That's very cool. Yeah, and to provide a little bit of commentary on that from my perspective, for me, one of the key words in this is meaning. Is kind of, for me, the other side of that what you described, the rational molecule-based thinking, which is true, of course, and it has a part that it doesn't cover, which is kind of like your original question from your youth. It's like you're walking across a zebra crossing and you're like, why am I here? And the usual thing with the molecules and so on has more of this, well, it just so happened. You're just a universal accident. Nothing matters if you're extreme about it. And then in the more spiritual realm, and maybe the realm of meaning, it's more like you can see, you can feel that, how do I describe this, that things have meaning, that things are connected, that it's, I'm trying to explain it very plainly. It would be like it's very fun to be alive. It's like fun that things exist. You can see all sorts of connections. And that for me
it's
is
a beautiful gift. Yeah,
it's funny, right? It's, for me, it's also just so
it's
funny.
incredible, and it's such a joke, right? How on earth did we get here? And that's the amazing part of this whole experience. And you're right. On the one hand, nothing matters. Inherently, nothing matters, and on the other hand, everything matters. So. And ultimately, this is something that we need to make a choice. In our life, we need to make a choice. And if you take it to the extreme, then there is actually a choice between either nothing matters or everything matters. And there is actually not much in between. So
I'm not sure I understand.
Oh, no. Oh, this is Siri telling you that
Oh man.
And this is also where AI comes in.
What?
Oh yeah, baby. This is epic.
It's so
wonderful.
funny.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Love it.
That was the voice of our audience far and wide. I'm not sure I understand. With this cosmic little joke and note that is imbued upon us, I would suggest then let's take this time to bring it to the practical. We got the basics down. So to bring it to maybe your business or your work life, or maybe your being, and this is kind of recent news as far as I remember, going back to be a co-CEO of Paladin, something must have worked, right? You have your energy back. So this is very relevant to you, for you as a leader, as a founder and owner and maker of a company and of games. What worked here and what changed for you, and how does this go into your business, and so on, so on, and so on.
Mm-hmm. So there's this thing called founder syndrome, and it happens to almost every founder. I'm not saying this so that you, as a founder, you can, work around it. It's just going to be part of your life. But it's good to be aware of it, right? So if there's any founders listening, look it up, founder syndrome. It's important. And basically what happens is you start as the founder, you do everything. And, you hire your first people, you do the administration, you do the emails to the clients, you do sales, marketing, you do, you clean up the toilet if you have to, all of that stuff, you do everything. And then as you grow the team, you get to a certain point where it's like 5 or 6 or 7 people, and slowly it becomes too much to keep an eye on, right? So you can only handle so much people working for you. And as soon as you hit like 10, 12, maybe 15, that's the point where you're going to want to hire another manager to keep track of everything and to make sure that things are organized. And that process sort of, process of growth keeps happening the more you grow. And what happens is that the more you grow, the more you need to let go. But it's really hard to let go as a founder because it's your baby. It's, imagine in my case, I have all my net worth basically locked up in the company. If the company goes bankrupt, my 17 years, well, right now it's a little different, but let's say, 15 years, 14 years of blood, sweat, and tears would basically go down the drain. And I would not be, I would just not have, it would be a huge, huge setback because everything I invested in this thing. So you become a little bit overinvested. You do the things that worked in the old days, right? When you were smaller. So you constantly have to catch up with the state of the company as it is at that moment. You're usually a year or 2 behind, which is fine, but it's still a very big challenge. So the things I've learned is that it is very important to learn about these growth curves and to figure out where am I currently in my growth cycle, and how can I prepare for the next one. And there's usually, there's a leadership crisis. There's, it's pretty well documented. Every company goes through the same shit. And for example, we have another company that I talk to regularly, and they're very similar to Paladin, very similar size. And that means that they literally have the same problems. They, like, one-on-one, they have exactly the same problems. So, they might struggle with HR. HR is overwhelmed, and then we do too, so it's like, or we're looking for a COO and they do too, it's things like that. The solutions.
So you're
might be
living in
different
synchronicity with this other company.
Yeah, there's a little bit there is that, but it's also, I think in this case it's actually quite extreme. But but the overall, you can say like, oh, there's patterns, right? There's patterns, and this is also part of that reality check that you need to keep doing. So one of the things is, in terms of leadership, is to, on the one hand, take full ownership over leadership, really take responsibility for everything you're doing and everything that your team is doing, because it's happening on your watch, right? That's a difficult one to begin with. But then also, to add to that, to give the team the freedom to take ownership themselves. And that is such a paradoxical and difficult thing to balance and to figure out and to get straight in your own head and in your own heart, that it can be quite challenging. It was challenging for me. So this is one thing. So this is about leadership. Another one is that we've grown the company in a bootstrap way. So we didn't have external funding. And that always meant we were strapped for cash because growth costs money, right? So if you want to grow, there's an investment. You need to hire people. You need to buy the hardware. You need to, set things up, train them. It takes time to get people up and running, and therefore it costs money. So we were always short on cash, and we were always like just barely hitting the next milestone. And it also meant that we were very lightweight in terms of the management structure. So at some point, we had to let people go. We hit about 60 people, close to 60. Then we went back to 35. And one of the things we did, and I'm very grateful for that, is that we said, okay, we're going to keep the management layer intact because that will prepare us for the future. So if we want to grow to 60 again, then we need to figure out how to do that. And that means that we should have a management team to deal with the whole organizational change that's coming. So we kept that, and we had about a year, maybe 1.5 or 2 years, where we just invested in the structures and, things like salary scales, things like processes for performance reviews. A lot of it was HR related, in fact. We just invested in that, and now it's paying off. So there's a lot of good things that came out of it. What else? Vision. Yeah, man, vision is so important. If you would say so ultimately, if you have co-founders, super critical to sit down with them and to establish your vision for the future, 5 years, 10 years. The timeline doesn't even matter that much, but where do you want to go? What's the direction? Do you want to grow big, or do you want to stay small? Do you want to do work for hire, or do you want to do your own games? What kind of games? What kind of platforms? Why are you doing this in the first place? What's your personal motivation, right? You'd be surprised what comes up, because it's not always the obvious thing. And for some people, they just have to do it. They can't not do it. But for others, entrepreneurship is a tool. And I think that's very healthy, that entrepreneurship should be actually viewed as a tool. And maybe also the last resort to achieving something you cannot achieve any other way. But getting that on the table and debate it and align on it with your co-founders, with your senior team, I think is critical, because if you have it, it takes some time, but if you have it, then it's a really good foundation for the decisions you're going to be making over the years. And this goes for culture as well. And one of the challenges I had related to vision was that I mentioned in the beginning, I was like, oh yeah, I want to be a millionaire before 30, and I want to have a studio that is 30 people. Well, first of all, the first goal was total bullshit, because that's not in my control, and it was a monetary, a financial, money goal. And of course, that doesn't work. It caused a lot of trouble for me personally, I think, to have a goal like that. So I would highly recommend to find a goal that's not money, but to find your purpose, your deeper meaning, like what you just said, Simon. It's all about meaning in that on that front. What do you want to bring to the world? Why are you here? Why is this company here? Why should it exist? But the other one was like, 30 people, cool game development studio. And once I achieved that, then I was lost, because I just didn't know what the next step would be. I didn't have a vision yet for the future. And it took me a long time to get there. And actually, it took my old CEO to resign and me to go back, plus the ayahuasca trip to Colombia, in fact, to find that vision again. By the way, ayahuasca is it's really funny, because first 15 minutes, like, oh, that's where you're here for. Okay, this and this and this. Oh, okay. And now we can get to the real work. Okay. Yeah, it's beautiful. Anyway, but So I finally figured that one out. So I got back with a clear vision for the studio, and we refined that together with the whole team, and we sort of now we're in a place where we can clearly say, oh, this is a Paladin game,
So maybe one
and we
more
could always
question.
feel that, but now we can put words into it.
Oh, sorry.
No, go for it.
Yeah, I have one more question before. I think Florian, I'm sure, has some questions, but maybe this is a good segue. I just thought of it. That's why I eagerly jumped in. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
You said you went and found a new vision. And would you like to describe this changed vision that's from, okay, I wanted to be a millionaire / cool game studio with 30 people? Like, what's a new vision that you would recommend, which also I think brings us firmly into the now and what Paladin is?
Yeah, absolutely. So for a long time, I was struggling with this because, making games are, it's entertainment. It's like, does the world get better from this? I don't know. I don't know. But I realized that actually it is very much possible to create games that have an impact on people. And if you have an impact on people, then it better be a positive impact. So I came back, and I think we did some iterations on it, but in the end we landed on a mission statement that says we create wholesome games that have a positive impact on people. And what we mean with that is not so much that we are going to be preachy about certain things. We're not going to, solve world hunger or create world peace. That's not what it is. But it could be that you laugh out loud when you play one of our games. It could be that you're sitting on a couch playing a game like Good Job that we did for Nintendo, and that it strengthens your bond with your sibling or your friend. So we consider that a positive impact. And later we also refined it a little bit more. It's about creative play. So that's one component of it. And play is everything, it's all about play. And this is also true for my personal life. So I'm very grateful that this is part of the Paladin vision or mission for the games that we create. They're also uplifting. So these games that we create are uplifting, and I think that's a beautiful word. Wholesome is another word, but it's a bit it's not tainted necessarily, but it's a bit colored, I would say. If you say wholesome games, that it has a certain connotation that it's maybe too soft and squishy. We want it to be uplifting, but we could still have fights in it. I don't know, but something that's uplifting. And the third pillar is meaningful connections, creating meaningful connections. So these are the three pillars that we later defined. Actually, the game directors defined it to support the bigger mission. And that's where we are today.
So I'm also here today, although I've been quite quiet. I had 1-2 moments where I wanted to jump in, but actually, with your discussion or with your topics, I found myself listening a lot and not wanting to interrupt with something that didn't come out of your minds in a way, because you had that conversation, and I really held myself back because I was thinking a lot about, like, very much internalizing what you were saying. So sorry if I was a bit hands off, although the philosophical or although this part is usually Simon's, but I'm usually not that hands off with it. But one thing that I'm interested when you say that's where we are now is, of course, we had this 17 years of development, you leaving, you coming back. So tell us, what is Paladin Studios now? How many people work there at the moment?
That's a good question. So we have about 50 people, 50, in the Netherlands. I'm currently co-CEO. So there's another CEO together with me, Stijn Damen, who's been with the company for 10 years. and started as an intern, by the way. So that's pretty cool growth curve. And then we also have a studio in Poland called Stormbound Games, and that is a 10-person studio that's focused on the game Stormbound, which is originally created by Paladin, but we spun it off into a separate studio just to make sure that we don't mix these things too much, because it's a slightly different vibe in terms of the kind of game that we
Yeah, I remember.
creates.
Isn't that? I think that could be the game, because I had 2 or 3 touching points with Paladin Studios over my career, and I think Stormbound was the game that you showed at Indie Arena booth in 2017 when I was working there.
Yeah,
could that be?
Very, very, very much possible. I think so. Yeah, we were there.
Yeah. Cool.
It's a collectible card game. Yeah, go check it out.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, games that were in that year's collection, I did the press work and a lot of showing people around the booth, and so I had to memorize many of the games. So yeah, games that were in that collection I usually remember to some degree. So as like this story, I mean, it's interesting, first of all, that your studio has been going on for so long, especially with this kind of, I mean, your personal entanglement as one of the founders obviously plays a huge role in the history of the studio. And I find it very impressive that we are sitting here today basically, and the studio is still alive in that regard. It changed over time. You went into the whole downsizing and then hiring people again. But to come back a little bit still to this, to the emotional side of it, but I think that's very important also in showing success stories. How did this impact you, like this journey of starting out and it being a success, then having throwbacks, maybe stuff that brought you down? Like, specifically, how did you deal with this kind of these setbacks or this kind of from a business perspective?
So there's 2 parts of it, I think. So from a personal perspective, which is also very important, the thing that I did that I think has the most impact is that I made peace with the worst case scenario. So I would, there were many times when we would almost go bankrupt, and I would basically be very afraid of it, very afraid. And what you do, what your intuition does if you're afraid of something, is you try to avoid it, right? But it also means you don't want to think about it. You don't want to look it into the eyes. And at some point I sat down and said, okay, I need to now, look it in the eyes. So I went through a mental process of going through the bankruptcy. What does it entail? Of course, I didn't know the details. That was not the point, but just doing the paperwork, firing everybody, wrapping things up, packing my bags, packing the stuff that, packing the office, selling the items, all of that stuff. And then going back, and then what, and then I figured, okay, well, I could get a job at Starbucks, and I realized that, oh, wait a minute, actually, I could get a job at Starbucks, and I wouldn't have to leave my home, because I was living in a very cheap apartment, like 400 euros a month in rent. Together with my partner, I knew we would survive, right? I wasn't going to die. Sure, my reputation would be gone. My sense of my ego would be shattered, but that felt strangely liberating as well. So when I looked that into the eyes, I was like, oh, the worst case scenario is not that bad. And I think that helped me to deal with a lot of the really tough times that were happening. So that was the personal note. Strategically, on a business side, we always found the balance between adaptation and sticking to our vision and our core values. So that's part of it. The other part is that I think we were fairly risk averse at all times. So we never bet the farm on anything.
Mhm.
And there's always, with work for hire, there's always this, you're at the mercy of your clients, right? So you always have to hunt for the next project. If the next project comes, then fantastic. You can pop the champagne, new project, but then you have to actually deliver it, right? And usually that means
Mhm.
that, you have to grow, you have to open vacancies, you have to build another team. And then when the project is done, then suddenly, the team is out of work. And then what are you going to do? Yeah, you're going to chase the next one. So it's this constant rat race of, trying to find new clients and new projects. So we always tried to make sure that, we had a backup plan. So I would go to about 10 trade shows a year just to pitch, just to stay in touch with the industry, just to get any new RFPs, all of that. And I really put a lot of effort into the sales process. Even if we didn't necessarily need it, then we would still go out. And slowly over time, you build up a reputation, right? And then it gets easier to sell new projects because they know, oh, these guys, Paladin, they're good. They will deliver. We don't have to worry about the quality. We don't have to worry about a lot of things that some other studios might be a little bit more challenging. And so that really helps us. And also another thing that I did strategically is to try and get royalties into the contracts, because that way, even though the hourly rate is a little bit lower, you do have an upside. So if there's a hit game, then you can get royalties. And even if it's not a hit game, then the royalties still add up, right? If you have 4, 5, 6 games all generating a couple €1,000 a month, then that's still a significant chunk. It takes off the pressure a little bit from the whole work for hire. So and of course, if you have a hit game and you have some royalties, then that's fantastic. That's a game changer in a way.
That leads me to a question or a point that we can also look into from two different angles, which is you as the founder or as the owner of the business have to make the strategical decisions. And I think, of course, you come to this point. It's very important, I think, for your personal life to come to this point where I don't want to say you're not afraid of anything anymore, but you are aware of what it entails for you personally, and that you are fine with the consequences of however things go. I think this is very important. But with owning
and this
a
is where the
business
spiritual practice comes in.
With owning a business and employing people, you add a layer on top of this, which often lets people shy away from this decision, or even when they've made this decision, sort of like falling into like
the old routine
stasis or trap of like having now this sword hanging over them saying, oh, it's not only about myself, but it's only now I'm deciding for other people as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So this would interest me in how you dealt with that and how you communicate with your staff or your colleagues about this. And then from the angle of the royalties, do you also have any kind of participation in terms of royalties or in terms of the success of the projects for your team members?
Okay. So to begin with the last one, we don't have that yet, but we do have a bonus pool that we, sort of a profit share. So there's that. And we're going to set up a participation plan this year. So it's coming. Then when it comes to the other question, how do you carry the weight of this whole company, right? And the answer is you don't. There's so much out of your control as a leader that it's just impossible. So you need to take full ownership over the things that are in your control. And it's just, that already is a huge burden, and it's plenty to work with. it's your own behavior. How do you respond to certain situations? All of that stuff is critical. But that if you put your focus there, then at least you can do something about it if something goes wrong. And so I do not have control over whether a client says yes or no to a project. Of course, we have, we can influence it, right? So the control I have is over, is the pitch any good? Are the people on it, are they the right people for this game? All of that stuff, that's the stuff that I have control over. So that's what I focus on. And then, it requires a certain trust that the universe will take care of itself, and also that people, even if they have to go for whatever reason, or if they want to go for whatever reason, that is usually okay. It's going to work out fine, and if you have good intentions and you don't fool yourself, then I think it's okay. It's usually people and things land on their feet. But it's tough and it's not easy and it's not for everyone. This is a big reason why my co-founder left, because he was just the burden of running this studio and having this team. I think we were 7 people at that time, and not knowing whether we could pay the bills and pay the salaries next month. He was just like, I don't want this in my life. I want the freedom. So he went back to go and be a freelancer, and that has worked out super well for him. And he's done amazing things in that mode. So it's not for everybody, and that's just and I can't help myself in that sense. I just I want to build things. I want to. Or I used to be. I'm no longer that much, but I used to be this empire builder kind of person that just wants to build something that lasts, basically.
Yeah, I think that's this compulsion is something that many founders basically have, as you mentioned before, that maybe you come to the point where, well, I cannot reach whatever goals I want anywhere else, so I have to do it myself. So I think that is where many people finally take the step or make the decision to do that. And also I think that's a very, very vital way of approaching the problem, what you said, with like influencing the things that you are in control of and worrying about that, and having that other side, like just letting it go and understanding that it is beyond what you can do. What I wanted to come to is, you mentioned it already throughout the conversation, your sales process. So you do a lot of work for hire. And when you go to your website, there's all the IPs you've been working with. And what interests me, I think, and what will interest listeners maybe, is there are quite a few big stakeholders in the games that you've developed. For example, you mentioned it, Nintendo is one of them, now the new game with Netflix. So how do you gain sort of like an open door, or how do you get people to listen to you, and how do you even approach these businesses in trusting you with their licenses?
Honestly, I think it has mostly to do with portfolio and reputation. So the ball got rolling for us when we created a game called Momonga Pinball Adventures. This was a self-published, self-funded, self-developed A to Z Paladin game all the way, indie basically, and pulling that off and just working on it and blogging about it and showing it to the world, in the end has basically led to it was this moment in at a conference in the UK, where Develop Brighton, where we were part of the showcase there. So I was standing there with my little iPad and just showing the game. And then there was this little group of Japanese people that came by, and they saw the game and they loved it, and they were like, "Oh man, we're looking for a developer to work with. We would love to work with you." And this was DNA, back then one of the bigger mobile game publishers in the world, Japan specifically. And I think 3 months later, we started working on the project with them. That was super lucky. Without that, Paladin would probably not exist. So without Momonga, we wouldn't exist. But without showing that you can do something like that, it's going to be very hard to convince these kind of people to work with you. So it really comes down to portfolio and experience in that sense. And then you start working with DNA, and then Bandai Namco comes along, and then suddenly you have 2 Japanese publishers, and then I've been talking to Nintendo for 10 years. It never worked out. The pitch after pitch after pitch after pitch after pitch after pitch. Became good friends with them in the meantime, but still, they have a certain way of looking at things, right? And then it just so happened that the stars aligned. I made a proposal that they accepted, and then we were able to make a demo, and they greenlit the thing, and that was based on the executives having a good time playing that demo, laughing out loud, playing the demo, and that's their process. Okay, so that's one of those things where you cannot really turn that into one bite-sized. Oh, you should do this. The only thing that I can definitely give as a piece of advice is to get out there, show your stuff, show your face, talk to people. You will get smarter, you will be inspired, they will know you, and you want to be one of the regulars. That's just where you want to be. And if that's the case, then maybe after 10 times talking to somebody, they will finally say, "Hey, yeah, we got this." I've been talking to Zeptolab for, I think it was 5 years. And remember, I did 10 trade shows per year, so that's probably, well, they were not at every trade show, but probably 20, 30 touch points with the contact there. And it never worked out. But right before he left, the last project, that was a different one. I think he left, but then, I don't know. He left, maybe not, he left right after, but we were regulars, we were the party they would go to. So when Apple Arcade asked Septolab to create Cut the Rope Remastered for Apple Arcade, they were like, "Oh, this sounds amazing, but we don't have the capacity. Do we know a studio that could do this?" And he was like, "Oh yeah, of course, Paladin. Let's give him a call." And then before you know it, we're doing Cut the Rope Remastered, and it turns out to be a hit game. So that really, it's all of those little interactions combined that move mountains.
Yeah, and I think you summarized the takeaways pretty well, spot on what I would have then sort of distilled out of what you said, that visit the trade shows, talk to the people. I mean, in general, business development, having enough touch points, just letting people know, hey, we're still here. I can also remember being in a pitch with Nintendo, and it was completely like nothing to write home about. It was, well, your games look interesting, but we're looking for this. And so maybe at a later point, and now I don't work in development anymore or for that studio, so at this point it doesn't really matter, but just being able to be in that situation, it just came from being at a convention, having a booth there, having an open slot in the matchmaking system, just
exactly
giving yourself the chance to having that conversation. And if it doesn't work this time, then it might happen next time or the time after. So it's a
just
consistency issue as well, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And they are all looking for the next great partner to work with. They are all looking for you, but you got to be ready and you got to be there to show up. That's the trick.
And can we talk about the amazing power of friendship?
Oh yeah.
Question mark.
Man. Absolutely. Things shifted for me as well when I decided, hey, I'm not just going to go to conferences, but I'm also going to focus on building friendship. And Stephen, you mentioned Stephen Lee last time he was on your podcast, really good friend of mine. He's such a great guy, right? He's such a good friend, one of the most social people I know. And, building that friendship with him, but also with others, it's just enriched the whole experience of going to a conference. So what we now do actually is we also spend some time with friends in a cabin in the woods before or after a trade show, and then we go hiking or whatever. We just do fun stuff, and that is turning out to be one of the blessings actually of doing this, because ultimately the friendships will last no matter which company you're with, no matter what you're doing, and how well things are going. It's these friendships are extremely I was going to say powerful, but I think that's not the word for it. It's more like rewarding. I would say that's
Rewarding, nourishing, and you
nourishing.
have these, right? You have these things that are, so what you're describing is kind of like you have this crew, right? I mean, I saw pictures on Facebook the other day where you guys were at a football game or something, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And so it's like, that's nice. I talked to Steven the other day. I know Rebecca.
Totally.
I'm going to talk to Derk next week, and I'm like, sick. Okay, that's the crew, and I used to have this too when I was doing Twitch. I was, and for me, that's also very important. Just as you have these concentric circles of focus, so you can do the triage basically for your business. You can, and for yourself, you can say what's important, what isn't, what do I focus on, what do I don't, what's under my control, what do I don't, what isn't. Then you have like these concentric circles where you kind of want to try to mostly stay in the middle. With friendships, it's a bit different, but you have, for me, my life changed when I found out about different types of relationships, of friendships as well, where they're like the core, my crew, that's like, they're not in the same business. They're basically all over the world. We're always on Discord and stuff, but we see each other, and these are my people that help me. Like, these are the pillars of my life, and they are really essential. I can tell them everything. I have no downside. This is just pure love, basically. And then in the industry, like you kind of described the Nintendo scenario, where you do 10 years of meetings with Nintendo, and then you're like friends with Nintendo. It's probably not your crew. You're like more acquaintances. You're like buddies. But the strength of friendship is in there too. You have trust. You know your face.
Oh yeah,
maybe you've gone through a difficult situation together.
Yeah, for sure. And again, these are all just people looking, for something nice, and they want to hang out at some point, right? I remember clearly it was beautiful E3, and I ended up with some people, including Tim from Nintendo, on a beach in Santa Monica in LA, under a starry night with a bottle of wine, and it was just wonderful. It was really, really nice. And a couple of months after we signed the deal for Good Job. Now, are those two related? Actually, they're not, but it's still not necessarily a coincidence, because you get to know each other, and if you know each other, and this especially with a company like Nintendo, they're Japanese, they're traditional Japanese, right? They operate on trust and respect, and their contract, for example, is just, it's poetry. It's simple, it's beautiful, it's to the point, and it's based on trust. And they can make that contract so simple because they are extremely careful with who they work with. So and this is really something. And I think, Nintendo is a very special company. They are different. They are built different, but they are built different. But in a way, it's the personal relationship that matters in that regard. And I got to be honest, right? I'm not the best with this. because I'm such a busy life, and I have so many people that I know. I cannot catch up with everybody and keep track of everybody, and I'm not on social media a whole lot, and I'm not the kind of person that just grabs the phone and places a call to just catch up with someone. I that's not in my system. It's not something I do. But also, the interactions I do have are genuine. They are authentic, and I there's genuine love, for everybody I meet at a conference, and I think people feel that and they resonate with it. I'm a hugger, so I hug a whole bunch of people. I think it's probably 100 people every trade show, and I just love it. I love their stories. I love how inspiring it is, and I love seeing these people make moves. And then their business is growing, and suddenly they have 70 people, and it's like, yeah, you see the big smile on their face, and it's just wonderful. I love it. And I love it when people are successful. So, and that's not because I want something from them, right? It's just from love, really, really pure love.
And for me, that's also key. I kind of wanted to ask you, okay, so now we talked a bit about the practical stuff as well. Maybe and you said as kind of a side note earlier, and that's where the spiritual practice comes in. And for me, that was my business too, right? It was like making friends with people, being in touch earnestly, and rooting for everybody. For me, that's also huge spiritual practice. It's just having love for people and not wanting anything, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Are there other points in the story that we just kind of told where you're like, okay, but look, this is actually practice in a way?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is spiritual practice in a way, right? So, clean up your shit, clean up your body, clean up your habits, clean up your relationships, clean up everything, and that is spiritual practice. It's that's the hardcore thing, right? It's not something that's floaty or woo woo. You don't have to burn incense for it. You just need to do the work. The incense is just
but some
nice.
ayahuasca helps.
Well, ayahuasca shows you the relationships, and it shows you your own shit in your own life, and it helps you to clean your body. So it does help. But of course, ayahuasca also gives you homework, and the homework is what really matters. So
this brings up an interesting point where we will also segue to another topic that I wanted to come to anyway. But I hope this goes the way I would like it to. What do you say to people? Because I think exactly this is how these kind of relationships grow and go along. And I can completely relate to this whole, there's so many people I would need to catch up to, and it's really hard. And on the one side, I see it as part of my job. On the other side, there's really people I'm genuinely interested in, and I get joy from meeting them. So I can relate to this, like, wanting the connections to be real and be meaningful, a word that we used a lot today as well. What do you say, on the other hand, to people who actually believe, and this is a critical point, that the games industry is sort of a closed shop? It purports having relationships and leaning on those to get along versus being open and like diverse in a way, and letting people in there. I often get into conversations or hear this point that you cannot move along in the games industry if you don't have these kind of connections. So, I mean, in this case, you and me and Simon, we are people who live in this kind of world and move in this kind of way and circle, that we build relationships, part of because it's our job, but also we see like just the personal benefit, and the job comes along with it. But do you get these people who say maybe that is also hindering other people?
It's a tough one. The thing is, they're right, you know, but it doesn't apply to the whole of the game industry. It's such a big industry, and it's such a diverse industry in that sense. So it depends, you know. The only thing that I do want to reflect on is that if this is the way you see it, then that is the way it will be. So if you see it as this place where it's a walled garden, you can't get in, you know, you need to have connections to get ahead, and then that implies, of course, you need to use those connections to get ahead.
Yes.
Then yeah, there will be a lot of resistance, and there's not a lot of doors that will open for you. And if they do, they might be the wrong doors, because yeah, there's some folks out there as well that will use you.
Yes.
If that's the way you believe the world works, they will take advantage of that. So my suggestion for people that struggle with this is to, first of all, be patient. Second, focus on establishing real connections and real friendships. And it doesn't have to be with a lot of people, but just a couple. It will suffice, you know. Third, get out there and show your face and talk to people, and, you know, try to help them, right? This is a good way of thinking about it. Networking is not about, oh, what can you do for me? No, it's about, what can I do for you? That is the best way to network. And then, you know, I'll be honest, I think it was probably 12 years ago, my first Gamescom. Yeah, I think it was like something around it, maybe more, maybe 15 years. I don't know. It was in Leipzig still.
Oh yeah.
Long time,
That's
a long time back. And we didn't have a clue what was happening. And we went there with a bus, and it was a group of developers. We had a blast. I made some really good friends there. But the show itself, oh man, I just saw these big wide walls, and, you know, you go to the reception of a big company, and they're like, and you're like, hey, can I get a meeting? Like, no, fully booked. So that is really discouraging, right? But and actually, the first 3-4 Gamescoms were like that for me. But I you know, I also made friends, and there was this local group of people, the Dutch folks, that were open to talking to me because we were Dutch, right? So that's a good starting point. And just start local, and then made some friends there, and I sort of got the hang of it after 5-6 years. It took a while. It doesn't need to take that long, but you know, what I wanted to say is, it comes down to being a regular, right? If you go to a random bar at the corner of the street, and you walk in, you're like, oh man, I'm a stranger here, you know? And then the second time, and the third time, and the fourth time, and the fifth time, you're still a stranger. You're still the new guy. But the 7th time, the 10th time, the 20th time, you're not the new guy. You're the regular. And then you're
and I have a very important comment on this. It just takes 2 times, in my opinion. That's usually why for this podcast we do pre-interviews, which you denied us. Thank you very much. No problem. No, but look, we already met one time before, and it's infinitely easier. It's only the first time that's really hard, and the second time is like, oh, aren't you the guy that? People remember you if you're like reasonably truthful and expressive. Sorry for jumping in, but for me, it really only takes
you're
2
absolutely
times.
right. Yeah.
One time where you have a conversation, and then you have the second conversation, and by that time you have a memory image in your mind and the other person of you, and then they know you, and you know them, and you have a little story about each other that you can expand on. 2 times, my friends. 2 times.
Yeah,
all it takes.
And I think what adds to this is, it also wasn't easy for you, or or for other people who are at the point that they are now. And I think that's also what does not factor into this way of thinking, is that, yes, sure, you see that person now in that position that they're in after, in your case, 17 years. You see them having this connection. You see them saying, oh, I'm friends with Nintendo. But the way to that point is years and years. And as you mentioned in that specific case, 10, 12, I don't know how many times when it didn't work out, or that were there to build a relationship. And it boils down to not seeing it as that transactional thing where here I want something or I give something in terms of business or value or whatever, but it's like just really building relationships, and that just takes time. So you cannot expect to just come to a door that is open for you. That is just not how the world works.
No, correct. And the more you see it like that, the more it's going to be like that. That's just.
But what I like.
Everybody has something to say.
No, go for it. Yeah.
I want to answer your original question, Florian. Then you can round it out. Your question was that's what Derk just answered to. Is like what if people see it that way, right? And then of course Derk has said it 5 times already, and it can't be said enough. If you see it that way, it's going to happen. That's spiritual practice 101. You can kind of just believe the other thing. Just believe that people like you. It's not that simple, but I highly recommend it.
Intention is to make friends. It's a completely different thing. Yeah.
And like believe you will find the person that are good for you. You might not make friends with the famous guy or girl, but they might not even like you, and you might not like them. So you'll find, another nerd like you, just to stereotypize a bit if you're feeling a bit shy or something. But that's the connection you actually meet. And it goes one by one. And what I also really wanted to say is, what did I really want to say? Wait a minute. Believe that it's possible. Yeah, no, totally forgot. Sorry. Maybe I'll get back to it.
I'm sure you're gonna remember. I'm sure you're gonna remember in a minute. Yeah.
Well, I'll just move to the next point, and then you just jump in whenever you come up with it again. So what I actually like, and what I think is the coin, the flip side of the coin, the coin side of the flip, is that you are actually part of a collective of investors investing in Dutch projects, which is called Midgame Fund. We talked to Fedor at one point, I think episode 6 or something of this podcast, if I remember correctly, or maybe earlier, who is also connected to this. But since it's been almost 2 years, I think, when that happened, it's cool to bring it up again. That is the flip side, where you specifically, and I want to frame it, and then you tell me if it's correct. You are a collective. That's actually how it's described, of investors. So that means that you found yourself together, and it's, I think, mostly industry people who've had a certain amount of success. And you specifically choose Dutch projects that you invest in, and it says under favorable terms, meaning that you're actually leveraging your connections that you had and your success to help others who are newer or who are less experienced, who are looking to have their break.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, and it's also sometimes really experienced companies or people, studios, small studios usually. But So this is a model that works for everybody. Classic win-win, as they say, and it's a beautiful thing. It's this way. It's a lot easier for studios and developers to get that initial funding going, and for us as investors, it's a way to, first of all, give back to the community, but also, with a bit of luck, have some profit on our hands as well. It's capped to I don't know, I think it's 5x of the investment, and there's like it says on the website, it is favorable towards the developer. So we'll hopefully have a couple of lucky breaks, but if not, then that's what it is. So it's really it's nice, because this way we get to see what's new and hot in the industry. We stay in touch, and we get to fund the coolest and the best projects. So what more can you wish for? It's really nice.
And how did this collective come about? Like, was that also a process over a long time, or was there a moment when somebody initiated this? How did this start?
Yeah. Yeah, it was initiated by Adriaan de Jong, who is
Mm-hmm.
also a very successful indie developer from the Netherlands. And I think he was also part of what's called the Indie Pub Fund, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this is a fund that is run by worldwide super renowned indie developers that are funding in a similar way. The only challenge he found with that, or that he felt was a bit of a shame, is that it was really, really hard to get in and to get something funded. And it's in part also because of the terms of it. There's a very limited cap on the return that the fund receives. So that means that the potential return is quite low. That also means that the risk appetite is lower than usual. So usually the projects that get funded through that, and I'm not in it, so I cannot
Mm-hmm.
vouch for it. But I've heard that it's usually a little bit later stage, and we wanted to create something that's suitable for smaller projects,
Mm-hmm.
because there's a lot of small Dutch indies that are really just two people or one person, and they need maybe 30K or 50K or 150K. That's too small for something like the Indie Pub Fund, but it's definitely there is a market for it, if you will. And we also wanted to have a setup where we could take a little bit more risk. So instead of the 2x cap, we have a 5x cap. So that means that we can afford to fail a couple of times before we hit something good. And that's the mid game fund. So it's quite a nice setup.
Mm-hmm. And can you give a very brief overview of what you would consider favorable terms? Is that something that you are open to discussing?
I think I can. No, well, Adriaan and Martina might kill me for for saying this in public. The problem is I don't know the terms exactly because I haven't. It's been a while since I looked into it, but I believe that we grant a loan, and the loan is repaid based on the revenue. So if there's no revenue, there's no repayment. So that's the first pretty favorable term. Then I think the first until we recoup, I think 80% goes to the investors, 20% to the developer. So there's immediately already some revenue coming for the developer, even though they already got the grant, the loan. And once we hit recoup, then that flips to 80% for the developer, 20% for the investors. So that's quite favorable. Means that it takes a huge hit game to make a 5x, and then the cap is also 5x. So I think that's the basic terms.
That's enough. I think that's just as a rough thing. How long has the mid-game fund been going, and have there already been any success stories?
I think it's been going for about 3 years, maybe 3.5 years. And preparations were on its way, or longer than that, but we launched, I think, 3 years ago. We have, I believe, a handful of games funded. It's probably 5 or 6 by now. And none of them have launched yet. So we're still waiting for the first to hit the market. And then I can tell you if it's a success or not. But I mean, the funding alone in and of itself is already quite successful, I'd say.
Sweet. Yeah, that's the stuff I wanted to end on with the usual questions, or with the topical questions. And to round out each episode, we have something that is called our essential questions. And to start us off, I'll give over to Simon for this.
Thank you for the mic. I'll have you know, as a note in between, that I remembered what I wanted to say earlier.
Yes,
and
of course.
Maybe to not make it a huge topic now, but I think all industries are relationships anyway. And to have a
Mm-hmm.
true success in any industry, like to complain about everything is relationships is like pretty futile, because everything is relationships. I think that was want to be my sobering case.
It's about
And
trust, right? It's
yeah,
about trust. If you want to work with someone, you got to trust them. So how do you get there? Well, it's not your portfolio. It's not just your portfolio. It's also, knowing you and engaging with you.
humaning, being
Yes,
nice
playing the
people.
human game. Yeah.
Yeah, humaning around. Yeah. Big fan of that. Yeah. So if
We're a
anybody is
podcast for
struggling with that,
humans.
yeah, podcast for humans and games. This all goes very well together. And I think if there is a huge complainant on this, then that's a good, maybe a great wall that one is hitting and that one can improve, because being good at relationships is a game that can be improved. It's very difficult, but it's very
For
possible.
sure.
Yeah. Let's see. I would suggest we go through the essential questions, see what we got. We can do kind of quick fire. If you want to say more, say more.
Mhm.
And then maybe after we can wrap it all up. We have a cool, I think, many dimensional conversation here, and maybe you can give us some final words after. But first of all, essential questions.
Mhm.
Number one, what inspires you?
So it's a lot, but I would say it's things like music, nature, building a campfire, traveling around. I just bought a camper van, so I'm looking forward to traveling around in that. But also people, people talking to people, like we just talked about with relationships. So I'd say that's the short list.
Nice. Maybe a familiar question. What is the purpose of your being?
Yeah, honestly, I'm figuring that out, and yeah, it's hard to answer that definitively. So I would say the purpose of my being currently is to figure out the purpose of my being. Let's put it that way.
Great. Very great. The universe witnessing itself. Very nice.
Mm-hmm.
What's a beautiful day to you?
Yeah, time spent with good people. I would say that's the main thing. But I also love just making music. Just being in my home studio, making music, playing the guitar, or making some track in some way. So that's I would say that's it. Traveling, I really enjoy traveling, even after all this travel, still do. Yeah, I think that's a beautiful day to me. A little bit of everything.
What is the change you want to see in the world?
I would say that the change I would love to see is that people become aware, or perhaps more aware, of their full potential as human beings.
And how do you contribute to that?
So, first, I think by talking about this stuff, you probably noticed that I'm pretty open about the sticky topics like spirituality. It's like, so I'm fairly open about it, and I would say those words and the conversations is probably the main contribution that I have at this moment. Of course, the company, something like Paladin, but also the Dutch Games Association or Stormbound. Yeah, I love to create organizations or ecosystems where creative people thrive, and I believe that creativity is the key, or one of the keys, to really affect change. It is through art that we understand and process the world, and it is also through art that we can shift the way we see things. So art is pretty important there. And in that light, also in the future, what I hope or what I intend is to create more art. So that's one thing, and to have more conversations, and to just be out there, and we'll see where that takes me.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Here's a question. If you would start a new safe game in your life right now, what occupation would your new character have?
This new character is probably a creator in the broadest sense, so musician or artist or writer, probably also coach or a mentor. Right now I'm more like running a business, management, that kind of thing. I think it's a beautiful profession, and I enjoy many parts of it. However, I would say the creative part needs a bit of love right now, so I would move towards that. So rather than being King Arthur, I would be more like Merlin the Wizard, I guess.
Nice. Last question from me. Do you have books that you often recommend, or that really had a great impact on you, or that you like to give to people? Could give a top 3 if you wanted.
Yeah. So one book that I read a lot and recommend a lot is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Maybe you're familiar with it. It's a Stoic philosophy book. Marcus Aurelius was an emperor, Roman emperor, and he wrote in his journal, private journal, and on his deathbed he ordered the destruction of that journal, but they kept it alive. So it's a peek into his thoughts, and his way of thinking is incredible. So highly recommended. The second book, I would go for Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. I think it's a beautiful book. About the Buddha, essentially. Warmly recommended. And last but not least, this is more feet on the ground again. It's a book called Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. He's an ex-Navy SEAL, and he talks about leadership, or he writes about leadership. And by the way, this audiobook is great because this guy is this Navy SEAL, and he's talking like this, and I'm in the trenches, and it's like wow, awesome. It's really cool. So Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink.
Jocko Willink, great reading experience, great audio experience. He also has a thing on Spotify that you can listen to, which is like an audiobook, but nothing conventional. But if you play it in the morning, it starts with "Get out of bed now." if you need a bit of a spiritual practice in the
wakes
morning.
Up at 4:00 in the morning, it's like he's hardcore. But it taught me a lot about leadership.
Book is great.
Really recommend
That's exactly how I picture your spiritual types getting out of bed in the morning. It's all about love.
Give me 10.
I had my mic muted, disclaimer, because Mochi the cat, our co-moderator, has been coming to me and hugging the mic. So excuses or apologies if there's any wild cat noise. Next essential question: what are your favorite games? Also, 1 to 3.
So I'm a big fan of strategy games. So my go-to titles are the Civilization series. I started playing Civilization 1 when I was very young, and I keep playing to this day. Dune 2 is probably my first real addiction in terms of strategy games. I have Dune Legacy, which is great for those who like Dune 2. It's a really good remake. Highly recommended. But it's really, it's an acquired taste. This is the first real-time strategy game. So yeah, you love it or you hate it. The third one, I struggle a little bit. I'm playing Assassin's Creed right now, which is really nice. I considered Stormbound, game like Fez. I really appreciate. There's so many games that I really love.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I don't know the third one. Many others. Stardew Valley, Mario Kart. Yeah, there's a whole bunch.
All right. Who's somebody from the games industry who you would like to get to know?
Yeah, I was thinking about this one too. Is like no specific person would came to mind, but in general, what I love is talking to independent entrepreneurs who run like small or mid-sized studios, because we have so much in common. And like I said earlier, we're usually dealing with very similar challenges. So it's always very enlightening and inspiring to talk. How are they solving things? How do they set things up? And what's going on in their lives. So I love that.
Mm-hmm. Then the other question, who is someone you know who you think we should have on this podcast? And as a disclaimer, this is actually how we got you on the podcast, because Steven said you.
Yeah. So I was also thinking about this one, and I think somebody who might be very interesting to have is Koen Deetman of Keoken. That's a Dutch studio, and they create Deliver Us Mars. And Deliver Us the Moon before. And it's two brothers actually, so that you might want to have both of them. And they're also, they have layers as well. So they're also, conscious people. I think they might be very interesting to have.
And they have spacesuits.
Exactly. And a really great game coming right up. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think they also were part of that 2017 Indie Arena booth lineup. At least they were at the booth and streaming there with in the studio.
Yeah, cool.
Very good choice. Last question: where can people find you? Meaning online.
Online. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Usually in a retreat somewhere in the forest in Colombia. No, I'm not really active on social media, but I am everywhere. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. Just search for my name. You can actually also find me on Spotify. So if you search for Derk de Geus, then you can find some of the music that I created. Disclaimer: it's not that great. No, it's fantastic. I shouldn't say this, but it's a hobby on the side thing. So just that's a small disclaimer. But also on derkdegeus.com and of course paladinstudios.com. You can find me hanging out.
Great.
Very nice. I have the last question, which is,
all right.
How would you like to wrap this up? What are your last words for this episode, as we went both into the realm of the spiritual and into the realm of the world, of the practical? What would be your unifying final message be here for us to understand about you or about how you see the world?
I would say that as human beings, you have everything in you. So the worst of the worst and the best of the best is all in you. And if you explore the inner landscape, then you will find everything. And the trick is to not avert your eyes, but to keep looking and to keep diving in, and then to put that into the world, whatever you find. So that is the invitation for being a human. You signed up for this shit, so you better get on with it.
Great. Thank you.
Great last words.
My pleasure. It was a lot of fun. Thank you for listening to my ramblings.
Thank you for coming on the show. It was great talking to you.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
Goodbye to the audience. Goodbye to Derk. Goodbye to Simon.
See you next time.
Until next time.
Until next time.
Hi there, Simon here. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you like what you hear here and you would like to hear more here, feel free to follow or to subscribe to the podcast on whichever platform you get your audio fix. We appreciate you and we promise you to bring you many more insightful conversations with fantastic games industry guests from Berlin and from all over Europe. Thank you very much and see you very soon. Bye bye.
Hi there! Before you go, this is Florian, Project Manager for GamesNet Berlin Europe. If you want to stay connected to the network, find out more about upcoming events and links to other MediaNet initiatives, you can visit us at gamesnetberlin.eu and subscribe to our newsletter. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast, and until next time.